You know, I usually stay out of these conversations, but with Caitlin Clark, I can't stay silent anymore.
Michael Jordan, arguably the most accomplished competitor in basketball history, has spent his post-retirement years being extremely calculated and selective about when he speaks publicly. And now he's finally said something. Not for a Nike promotion, not for a business move, but about Caitlin Clark.
I was like, come on, you big dummy.
Sheryl Miller, a Hall of Famer, two-time national champion, and Olympic gold medalist, recently appeared on the All the Smoke podcast and delivered what many are calling a sharp, perfectly timed critique of Sheryl Swoopes. At the same time, Michael Jordan made headlines by speaking out about Caitlin Clark, a second-year player, in a way that sent shockwaves across locker rooms, front offices, and sports media almost instantly. But here's the part people are missing. Jordan's decision to step in wasn't random. It came right as criticism surrounding Clark had reached its most intense and coordinated level. And when Miller followed with her blunt, no-nonsense reaction to the anti-Clark narrative, it shifted the tone of the entire conversation. Suddenly, those who had spent months trying to downplay Clark's impact found themselves on shaky ground. To understand why this moment matters, you first have to look at what Jordan was stepping into, because the criticism surrounding Clark wasn't just a one-off remark or isolated opinion. The hot take wasn't just a one-off opinion. It was part of a sustained narrative that played out over months, growing more confident the longer it went unchallenged. It began with claims about age. Sheryl Swoopes stated on national television that Caitlin Clark was 25 years old competing against 20-year-olds during her time at University of Iowa. In reality, Clark was 22 in her senior year, completely typical for college athletes. When the inaccuracy was pointed out, Swoopes attempted to walk it back, framing it as exaggeration tied to COVID-era eligibility rules. But that explanation didn't convince many who were paying close attention. And it didn't stop there. Soon after, criticism shifted to Clark's shot volume, an argument that many felt was ironic given the source. Then, as Clark approached the all-time NCAA scoring record, the narrative escalated again, with questions raised about the legitimacy of her achievement.
If it's legitimate, you have to break that record in the same amount of time that that player set it.
Okay.
Right? So if Kelsey Plum set that record in 4 years, well, Caitlin should have broke that record in 4 years. But because there's a COVID year, and then there's another year, you know what I mean? So she's already had an extra year to break that record. So is it truly a broken record?
Was the record really broken fairly? That question lingered for a moment, but the facts were straightforward. Caitlin Clark set the scoring record in 4 years, the same time frame as other players. What often went unmentioned is that COVID-era eligibility rules could have given her a 5th season, which she chose not to use. Once that detail is considered, the argument quickly falls apart. Still, by then the narrative had already spread. The conversation had taken on a life of its own, and many were waiting for a credible voice to step in and address it directly. That's when Sheryl Miller appeared on the All the Smoke podcast. She didn't come with a scripted response or carefully managed statement. Instead, she spoke from personal experience as a Hall of Famer and as someone who had coached Clark during the 2024 Wnba All-Star Game. With that first-hand perspective, she addressed the situation in a way that cut through the noise and challenged what many critics had been getting wrong.
No, Jax, you're absolutely right. And I was like, come on, you big dummies. Is she getting hyped? Yes. But she was in the backyard. She was putting in the same time, sometimes maybe more than you were.
Right.
I can't fault her for what she was getting.
You big dummies. That was Sheryl Miller's blunt message to those who had spent months pushing misleading narratives about Caitlin Clark, a player whose work ethic she had seen up close. The reaction was immediate. The studio lit up, clips spread across the internet within minutes, and suddenly the entire anti-Clark narrative had been challenged by a voice with undeniable credibility, one few could reasonably argue against. And the key point? Miller wasn't done yet.
Be honest, because it needs to be said. I can relate to that young lady, and I felt for her. I know what it's like to be hated. I know what it's like to be a black woman and hated because of my color.
Yeah.
That's where Sheryl Miller's perspective moves beyond simple basketball talk and into something more personal. Having gone through her own era of scrutiny and barriers, she looked at what Caitlin Clark was facing and saw a pattern she recognized on a deeper level. In her view, the criticism wasn't only about performance, stats, shot selection, or eligibility debates. It pointed to something more layered and uncomfortable, echoing challenges she had experienced herself years ago.
Can't imagine this young lady, I don't want to use hate, but despised. And people just having, she brought some on herself a little bit because she's cocky for a good reason.
Confident.
And I love that about her. But to watch the dynamics and the media, they had their narrative. And I was pleased and proud to see the narrative wasn't the truth.
The idea that the narrative wasn't the truth comes from a Hall of Famer who claims to have witnessed the situation firsthand. She even shared a personal moment of connection with Caitlin Clark after Indiana's first win of the 2024 season, describing Clark's visible emotion after dealing with constant physical play, criticism, and ongoing media pressure, yet still continuing to compete every night. From there, the story shifts into what the speaker frames as a much larger turning point in basketball discourse: the involvement of Michael Jordan. His entrance into the conversation, according to this narrative, didn't just support Clark, it reflected deeper issues within the system surrounding her. Jordan is known for being extremely selective with his public comments. Since retiring, he has built a business and ownership presence and rarely involves himself in controversy without clear intent. That's why, in this framing, his comments about Clark carried so much weight. The emphasis is on intentionality. Jordan didn't casually comment. He deliberately chose to speak. The argument suggests he saw a situation where a player was being unfairly undermined and decided his voice was necessary, not as promotion or obligation, but as direct intervention. It also highlights what Jordan reportedly recognized in Clark: not just skill or numbers, but an intense competitive confidence, an unfiltered drive that some people find uncomfortable. In this view, that trait is what critics were reacting to, and Jordan called attention to it with the authority of someone who has lived that same competitive reality. The narrative, according to this perspective, is that multiple legendary voices stepped in to challenge the criticism surrounding Caitlin Clark. Supporters argue that figures like Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, and Stephen Curry each, in different ways, acknowledged her impact and talent. Alongside them, Sheryl Miller offered a first-hand defense based on what she observed directly, emphasizing Clark's skill, court vision, and competitiveness. Together, this framing suggests a unified response from basketball greats pushing back against efforts to downplay Clark's achievements, portraying her as a fearless competitor already reshaping the women's game despite ongoing criticism and debate.